So maybe we can just skip to introducing each person. If we could maybe start with you and introduce yourself in 2 or 3 minutes on what kind of projects you're working on in your company.
Great. Is this on? Yep. All right. I'm Greg Ellis, Chief Strategy Officer with Data Wallet, and I'm subbing for our founder and CEO, Seraphin Engel, who got hit with a 24-hour bug last night. At Data Wallet, we're building the world's most powerful data exchange. Our mission is to transform the consumer data business globally by building a consumer-to-business data exchange that fuels better, more actionable business-to-consumer insights, powers better ad tech, and delivers more effective marketing solutions. We're doing that by building a secure, self-sovereign wallet that consumers download and permission that passively captures all of your social media and e-commerce transaction data. Data Wallet users can then allow marketers to access that data in order for insight providers so marketing solutions providers and insight providers access their data in exchange, and the consumer receives compensation in the form of our data exchange token, or DXT. Users can then spend their tokens for personalized AI applications or exchange them for cash. And the market that we're going after is a $200+ billion global data market, estimated to become the most valuable market in the world by 2022. And we think that by empowering consumers to essentially take control of their own data, that we can essentially provide better data to fuel, again, insight providers, ad tech, marketers, while benefiting consumers.
My name is Matthew Schutte, and I work with a project called Holo. And we've created an alternative architecture to the blockchain called Holochain. So we were not trying to do peer-to-peer money. We were trying to do peer-to-peer applications. Our goal is really to enable new forms of social coordination amongst humans. Our belief is that as a species, we're basically going to crash the planet unless we're able to come up with some better ways of coordinating at the scales that we operate today. Holochain is fully peer-to-peer. It enables people to run applications like peer-to-peer Uber, so Uber without the company in the middle, Facebook without the company in the middle, etc., using just the devices of the users themselves. So you can run this on just cell phones. How did we do that? We're not trying to do digital anonymous cash, so we're not making use of consensus. We're making use of some different patterns that we believe mimic the organizing patterns in natural living systems to enable more bottom-up architectures. You can learn more on Holochain at holochain.org. How are we funding that? We're basically giving that away to the world for free. It's a pattern that people use. There's no platform. It's an architecture that developers will use for designing an application, and that application runs just on the devices of the users themselves. We've built a different business model that will service that ecosystem and enable, let's say, a peer-to-peer Airbnb to speak to a traditional web browser, right? So you've got these folks running their little Airbnb business. You don't want grandma to have to install some new distributed computing architecture in order to be able to book a room. HoloHost is a service that enables members of that community to serve out websites to people in the regular web and get compensated by the developer or the community as a whole for doing so. So that's basically how we're trying to fund the growth of this ecosystem. We did an Indiegogo campaign selling some hardware. We've got an ICO starting next week. We don't do tokens. We've invented a different kind of currency that's basically just a double entry accounting system. It's a mutual credit currency. You can learn more about that on our website as well. And the only other thing I'll say on this is that I've spent much of the last decade working on distributed identity systems with the Rebooting Web of Trust community, Internet Identity Workshop, and a number of others. And I'll leave it there.
Good morning. My name is Joel Phillips. I run a company called Piggy, Pig.gi. and now launching a blockchain protocol on top of that called Siglo. I moved to Latin America about three and a half years ago with this idea that, look, 75% of the world almost is underconnected. Prepaid mobile, that's often expensive. And even though most people, an increasingly amount, have a smartphone in their pocket, they're still not participating in the digital economy the way that I'm sure all of us here do. And not reaping the benefits of it because of that, because it's still expensive and their connectivity is inconsistent at best. And we had the idea that, look, on the other hand, we had brands that are trying to be in front of these people, that are willing to sponsor, that are willing to pay for their attention, monetize their attention and the data that they're willing to share. And that's a way that we can get these people more consistently online. So we have a digital currency off-chain that we've been rewarding our users. So we have about a little more than 1 million registered users, active users in Mexico and Colombia, our first 2 markets. Our users share their data, completely opt-in, completely privately, when they choose to do so, and they get rewarded for that. And we think that that's really cool. And there was an article in the Times about a month ago, I believe it was, and I can't cite their sources on this, but they estimated that the average person's data in the US is worth about $1,000 a year. Now, in emerging markets, like where I'm at, that's obviously a lot less, but users do have a lot of data, and there's people that are willing to pay for that. And why can't we take that and pass most of that back to the user in a way that can really help them out, something like increased connectivity. So it's been completely run off chain to this point. We kind of did everything backwards, I suppose, in the current environment. We actually decided, well, let's see if this thing works. Let's see if we can get some traction on both sides, both with users and with brand sponsors. And let's see if this model works. And if it does, we always kind of had blockchain in mind in the future. And in the last year, we've really proved out that the model does work. And now we're implementing a protocol that will run the transactions and getting more and more to in the future of using smart contracts for users to manage their own data and be able to monetize that and be able to decide, okay, I'm going to share my opinion with this brand, but not with this brand, and this brand is actually going to give me a digital currency in return for that, and I can actually use that for something really, really practical. And obviously, we're focused on emerging markets, but it's something, everyone has a price, but that's just where we are right now. That's where we see some great need, especially in the connectivity space. So that's Figgy and that's Siglo.
Thanks.
Hello everyone, my name is Anish Mohammed. I currently don't have any projects as such. I help projects, including this project. I advise some of the startups in the space. I've been an advisor for Ripple Labs for the 4 years. And I'm also part of the Ethereum Swarm team, Swarm research team. So I'm interested in incentivization. And I've been a researcher in security and privacy in the last, probably a long while. I wrote a bunch of papers. I was in various labs, including Microsoft Research. Other things I do, I'm co-authoring a book on India Stack. So if you've heard about Aadhaar, I'm very much interested in identity globally. So I've been advising various national entities about privacy and security of their identity mechanisms. And I don't have any specific, protocols to talk about, but I'm observing anything, and I'm happy to be the guy with no axe to grind in that sense. I'll try.
Okay, man. Thank you. My name is Raman Frey. I lead business development at a place called Dispatch Labs in San Francisco. We're solving essentially for a very obvious use case. We're not the only ones trying to do this. We were at a convention recently, and there were more than a few representatives of, say, Fortune 50 companies who are convinced that this is the next evolution of data and want to migrate on the blockchain. But of course, if you have petabytes of data or 1 billion users right now, you can't do that. So at Dispatch, that's what we're solving for. Our CTO Zane is here. Our CEO Matt, who's got in last night. And I'm also a partner at the Bureau. The Bureau is a governing organization for this whole ecosystem that we operate in a large building and a mission. And we have an incubator space where we take small startups at the intersection of impact. We focus on social, environmental, and governance impact, and distributed ledger technologies. So these are companies that may use our own dispatch protocol. We have another in-house project called Constellation. They may use that protocol, or they may choose to use their own or develop their own. We take them through that ICO process and help them to launch their company. So that's what I'm up to. I'd love to just kind of get into the conversation here. Maybe somebody would like to talk to, just getting our basics here. We're talking about privacy and identity. What has identity been? What is its value now? And where do any of you see the use of identity going in terms of this ecosystem? Anyone like to touch on that?
So I think there's a widespread misconception about what identity is, what it's been and what it is. I think often we confuse identification cards or other sorts of credentials for identity. It's not the same thing. Identity is relative. It's always in the eye of the beholder, in the mind of the beholder. So who you are is dependent on who's perceiving of you, right? So for me, Rahman is a friend and a business colleague on occasion, and somebody who hosts amazing dinners, right? And for his daughter, he's someone else. Okay? The associations, the correlations live inside of the minds of each of the individuals. And we as a society use a variety of tools for helping us to leverage not only our own memories, but the memories and experience of others. Even when those others are a government agency, right? We trust ID cards for certain forms of verification because we trust in the process. Oh, yes, this has a hologram. It's hard to print those sorts of things. Okay, you're 21. Yes, I can serve you alcohol, right? But shifting to this relativistic view of identity actually leads you to very different architectures. Architectures that are actually much more empowering than we will create a single identifier that everyone will tie all of their interactions to. That's really scary. That single identifier thing, we had a breach of an encryption protocol or somebody figured out a new hack there. We have a catastrophic failure in our system. Suddenly people are able to impersonate others at will. That's a problem. So I'll just leave it there for a moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me go ahead and build on that. What's identity from an information data ecosystem perspective? There are lots of entities who market to each of us and want to make decisions, whether they're credit decisions or advertising targeting decisions or marketing decisions or insight decisions, and they source data to do that. In today's world, we've got these, particularly in the US, we've got these credit bureaus. They're able to license all sorts of data about each of us. That's hard connected to our PII, to our personally identifiable information. Then they have this amazing wealth, we're creating this amazing wealth of online information around who each of us are based upon our behavior. Attempts to connect all of that online behavior to our offline identity tend to involve probabilistic modeling and aren't very accurate. Each of us, is quite active online, and the entities with whom we're active with capture fantastic data to understand our behavior. So, Amazon or Google or Facebook know a great deal about each of us within their walled garden, but tend to be completely blind outside of that walled garden. And so, as a result, all of the activities that seek to understand and target individuals typically end up with incomplete or limited or flawed perspectives on who we are. And if in fact we can improve that while simultaneously improving our data security, we think that would create a fantastic future.
feel free. But just to follow on to that, I mean, as transparency increases and we have greater and greater insight into one another's digital identity, we can characterize one another. We can know whether, for instance, so-and-so is a good credit risk or not, is an obvious example. It opens up collaborative possibilities. In that context, as all of us becomes, I think, in some sense, identity-wise, more and more naked in public, does privacy matter?
Yeah, I land very differently on this. To me, I recognize that most Silicon Valley and other information-oriented business models have to do with preying upon consumers, right? Or stalking consumers. That might make for a good business model. That's not the world that I want to live in. And I don't think it's actually something that actually leads us into a better way of structuring ourselves as a society. Transparency is really valuable. It enables collaboration. But privacy isn't about secrets. Privacy is about control. It's about control over what I do with my body. If somebody else can control what we do with our body, we call that slavery. That's a privacy violation. If somebody else is able to interact with our body in a way that we don't have control over, we call that rape or sexual assault. It's a privacy violation. When others are able to do things with our information in ways that we didn't anticipate, that we thought, oh, this is a private thing, I'm just sharing with this person, all of a sudden it's shared with everyone. That's a privacy violation, and it actually undermines our ability to have agency and steer well in context.
So that kind of sovereignty, that individual sovereignty, that's something that I hear talked about a lot in blockchain and distributed ledger. Let's give power back to the individual and give them the discretion to access that identity as appropriate to the context and their tolerance for risk and reward. Is that right?
I mean, I'm sorry, it was just about to pick up on what he said and probably answer your question in that sense. The construct of privacy, I was a researcher in this space for a while, so I've seen this from both sides of the equation. I also was involved in writing information governance for one of the healthcare systems. So I've been in rooms where people had very different views on this. And what he described is pretty much true. The question of consent, what you want to reveal to somebody is very contextual. In any accident and emergency, when you walk in, the question is between your life and your privacy about who else you have interacted, quote unquote, very different. But in real life, in public, if your interactions are revealed, you might commit suicide. So information, both revealing and hiding, is very, very contextual. And consent is very contextual. Privacy is very contextual. What is actually being missed by a lot of these conversations, which I normally notice, is nuances are being missed. We have very binary view of the world. The world, as we see it, is not binary at all. I'm pretty sure everybody here would say, if I asked about somebody, what do you think of this person? They would never go, good, bad. No, that's not what it's going to be. It'll be, interesting. A, B, C, D, E, F, right? I would like this conversation to be reset with that ability to have nuances. Why can't humans have nuances? We don't operate binary. We have a fuzziness around it. Probabilistic models are good. Probabilistic graph models are pretty good to do this. But what I haven't really seen is there is no incentive for large organizations or entities who actually have information. There is an information hierarchy that actually allows them to have power. No new startup will be able to overcome the advantage that Google has because they have collected enough data, or Facebook for that matter, or Amazon for that matter. So this is the challenge we have. Whether we have blockchain or not, we are not going to be able to do that. So we need to think differently.
So those companies have what's often referred to as first mover advantage in the aggregation of that data and having a very accurate kind of predictive model of what an individual person is going to do. But we give that to them when we click the terms of service that nobody ever reads. And so I've heard some discussion around blockchain technologies kind of doing away with that terms of service or having something insanely simple and discrete that everyday consumers can understand.
Can I interrupt for a moment?
Yeah.
The thing I say is why the hell do we actually need to give away everything for a single transaction? Can't we actually have So see, say for example, if I am a friend of Joe, I am not his friend for my life. Am I? No. I don't.
He seems pretty nice. You make him
Okay, so what I meant to say is like we don't actually. I mean,
You may end right after this panel.
That's right. Depending on what you say next.
So, why do we actually need to do this for privacy? Can't we have a very time-bound contextual consent that is valid for a particular transaction? If that's true, why can't we do it?
Can I ask the panel maybe to let's address best possible scenarios for the ways in which distributed ledger technology operates in the world. Some of you are actually working on technologies that you hope will do this. Give us like the utopian vision of an individual in charge of their own identity and their own information.
Well, from a very non-technical point of view, I would say it's whenever I share my data, I'm in control of it. So, okay, I'm registering on this website. Okay, well, this is a website for, whatever, it's Facebook. Okay, they need to know who my friends are because I want to find my friends. So I choose to share that personal data. But all this other stuff, no, because they don't need that. But I should be in control and be able to manage my own digital fingerprint and what I'm sharing. I think that's the place we ultimately have to get to. And again, like going back to my personal thing, that data also has value. So okay, maybe you're gonna give me free access to your website like Facebook does, okay? I'm getting a value back. Or maybe I don't wanna share anything with you, but I'm willing to pay to have access to this. But putting that control back in the hands of each individual, I think that's the ultimate goal here, and I think that blockchain does have, and probably some others are better to talk about the technical pieces of how we make that a reality.
There's a company, I met the CEO at a recent conference on blockchain and cryptocurrency. I think the company's called this Sapien Network, and they're talking about you owning essentially your social graph. So the majority of the utility we gain from things like LinkedIn or Facebook or some of these others, it's really we're gaining the utility of our own social graph and instant access to it. Right here in Davos, I can know which of my friends are in town and when they're going skiing. But right now, we're also sitting in the middle of I don't know if people who are familiar with the concept of a panopticon. There's a prison, and in this metaphor, we're all the prisoners. And there's somebody in the middle, and they have absolute control and absolute insight into our lives. So, can somebody maybe address?
Sure. Going back to the privacy question, I'd like to put it in context of the current state. So, in the current state, basically, marketers and data brokers, they have all the power. They do anything and everything that they can monetize as long as it's not illegal. And as consumers, we have none of the power. And so I think that the future state that we're working towards at Data Wallet is really all about arming the consumer to take control of their own data and then to decide who they want to share what with, and the benefits then should accrue to the individual.
Right.
And so literally, many of us may not be aware of this, but everything you buy on Amazon, all of your history, transaction history, as long as you've used the same email address, you can access right now. Well, leveraging that same access, you can permission that to your data wallet, and then you can select it and you can integrate it with all of your behavior across social media, other commerce platforms, etc. And then you can selectively choose to allow a marketer or an entity to then access that data.
I want to address the question that you had asked around the utopia.
Yeah, best possible scenario, right?
It's pretty simple. So I agree that, hey, I consented, I clicked the terms of service. But I didn't really have much in the way of options, because the architectures that are available to me today all involve a web server sitting in the middle of me and the other interactions that I'm hoping to have. I just wanted to order a ride. I didn't want there to be a party in the middle, but the way that the architectures work today, there has to be. It's just how websites work. Blockchain changes that a little bit. It makes it so that there's no single party in the middle, but it actually does the sense making at a network layer. The community as a whole is a single perspective and a single set of processes for how it makes sense of the world. From my view, there's a step beyond that that gets much more interesting, and it's that each of us is able to decide, oh, I'm willing to play this game with you, and we've got mechanisms in making sure that we're playing that game appropriately. And I'm willing to play this other game with you, and I'm able to take things out of this context and share them into that context. And that I have a copy of my own data that I am sharing that, I'm making that visible in this particular context, in this particular relationship, but I'm also able to bridge between these spaces. And when you shift from an application-centric world to an agent-centric world, it starts to look a lot more like an ecosystem. And not only does it end up being far more empowering for the individuals who may open up relationships with various organizations, communities, marketers, etc., but it actually gives those communities an adaptive advantage because individuals are able to try things and learn, ooh, this worked great, and those patterns may get replicated by others who decide to continue opting into being friends with Joel, right? Rather than having to make that decision for life.
So I'm probably going to be the one who's going to be breaking some of the models. Firstly, I'm going to say some things. I'm sorry, this is not personal, just not me. So firstly, you can actually build sense making in a network without revealing what you're doing. There's a class of protocol called zero knowledge proofs that will allow you to do this. You can actually have consensus without knowing what the hell it is.
Has anyone here heard of zero knowledge proofs?
There should be enough of people. This is Zcash. Who holds Zcash? There you go. If they don't know, then they're in trouble. Okay.
Raise your hand.
Okay, that's the first bit. And the second bit, again, I spent a lot of my time thinking about this, advising people and people who build these things. So a lot of the problems that we have is complexity, right? So imagine India. India has 1.2 billion in population. They managed to get most of it on our power, okay? Imagine the complexity of having people talk to each other. You know, normally what happens is in this room, imagine everybody had to have a handshake with everybody else. It's n factorial. I assume there are 50 people here. You know what the number 50 factorial is? It's pretty big. Imagine 1 billion factorial would be. I don't know what that looked like, but you can go figure it out. It's pretty huge, tremendous, simply impossible to handle. So architectures have to be appropriate for what you're doing. That's very, very important. One-to-one transactions could be done. But what I'm very keen on us to understand is, number one, we as a society, need to understand what privacy means and this information lemon market means. Let me explain what that means to you. So you have a situation where other entities like Facebook, Google, Amazon has a better insight of your behavior than you have yourself. So we as a society need to come to terms with it. We need to either regulate ways in which you can allow people to hold data. There are mechanisms evolving. Example, I'll give you a technological solution. It's called homomorphic encryption, right? They can hold the data and they can search it, but they can't actually get hold of it and see what it is. Apologies.
Yeah, you can start taking some questions. Yes, go ahead.
Can I see hands who knows GDPR, privacy? Okay. And why was there no word at all? I come all the way from Zurich to listen to this panel, and I'm not hearing anything in that direction, and I feel very frustrated right now.
Would anyone like to address that?
I'm happy to, say a couple
Thank you for
words.
bringing it up.
Thank you.
Don't get me wrong, I don't think, without being offensive, there's going to be a massive, massive change in what is happening in Europe because GDPR is going to come out in a couple of months' time. I
am EU commissioner working. I work on the GDPR.
And
I only listen to how you are not even thinking about the possibility that you are not right. It is a disgrace for the EU. It is why TTIP did go down. It is why quality data is not in place. It's the reason why the banks are not wanting this, because they want to have guarantees. That were the questions I was asking the whole time. And I expect that this beautiful blockchain solution must be a part of the solution.
Okay,
but I want to listen and to hear from you how you're going to do the governance to guarantee this in all respect for the different, as you said before, ecosystems, because you have to adapt it to the different ecosystems.
So to start with, let me open up the whole challenge to you in a very different sense.
Yeah.
EU represents, this is a classic challenge of blockchain. You have a decentralized system that requires a centralized mechanism to bootstrap trust. That is what you're pointing at, and we all, anybody who thinks about this on a regular basis, spends time on it, recognizes that. So if blockchain were to ever have the kind of provenance that you are kind of thinking about, there have to be bootstrapping. Onboarding it, everybody, that any data, provenance of the data, that has to go back to the so-called centralized systems of trust. There's no real bridging that exists right now. I mean, as far as I know, I could be totally wrong.
Is there a tokenization incentive model that could get it going? Or are we
There are
getting too
models.
hypothetical?
There are models that are there. Say, for example, a couple of people are trying to do this. Ocean Protocol is trying to do this for ML. So I've been talking to those guys. So there are lots of people trying to do that, but it's not going to happen in any immediate future in that sense. As I said, the key challenge is from the physical world, which is centralized, right? You just described the panopticon and all the challenges that we are having, to a very decentralized world. How do you actually map the two? It's not an easy task.
You mean the transition from
the
one to the
transition
other?
from one to the other. He'll probably tell you in a much more nuanced sense how it is. But from a technologist perspective, it's a hard task. It involves not just technology, it involves governance, it involves other people, and a whole bunch of other
A lot of permissions as well. Yeah, go ahead. Would anyone else like to address this?
Go ahead, but I'd like to.
Certainly, the Wild West current state that I described best describes America, and GDPR is a really positive move in protecting consumers and their rights and their data, and certainly the kind of decentralized, self-sovereign solution that we're building is absolutely designed to address those privacy concerns and be GDPR compliant.
Can we maybe drill a little bit deeper? This might be satisfying or helpful to him. Is there a concrete example right now, even at a very small scale, a very experimental scale, of something that's up and running to manage identity and put control over that identity in individual consumers? Is there something out there that you think is really being very well done that could potentially scale that way or be implemented in other instances?
I happen to be holding the mic, so I'll talk about our stuff. It's early. So Holochain launched our alpha in October. We call it the Adventurer release. Do not build mission critical stuff on it yet, right? It's just for playing with. But we're in any Holochain application, when you start that app, you generate your own set of public-private keys, which basically gives you the ability to establish correlations. You can speak into the space in ways that others can go, oh, that was the same party speaking. And that's just how you're interacting in that particular context, that particular social sphere. When you're operating a different application, you've got a different set of keys. You are essentially two completely unrelated parties. And you need mechanisms for being able to build bridges between those. You need to be able to demonstrate to folks over here that, the thing that they said about me here is the same guy. Mm-hmm. And you also need mechanisms for being able to go, hey, my keys got breached. Right? And so we've been working on something we call distributed public key infrastructure. There are other parties that are working on this as well that are focused on bridging between protocols or application contexts.
Right. Interoperability is an important part of a lot of the blockchain protocols that are being built right now.
We were not interested as EU in the privacy. We were looking into liability for the industry. So if you are using big data sets, and at the end we make a decision that the decision is going to be, go south, then at that moment, who is reliable for that? And the only way to go back is that you are actually having the liability all the way down till the data subject.
Can I actually ask you this question? Have you looked at SLAs for the cloud?
Of course.
So I'm one of the idiots who actually wrote cloud bias decision guide, cloud security alliance guide, PCI, and all of it. So same question was asked. It took a while. But the thing is, if you could actually have the provenance of that SLA that actually happens for each of the transactions, it's easily doable. You can have a smart contract, you can have the whole graph being published, and a smart contract won't actually take any biases, human decision biases won't apply. You can have an oracle on the side to do whatever you need to do, and you can do that. And there's one other small challenge with having public-private key pairs. probably you would all recognize. If you look at TPMs, trusted platform modules, the first architecture had something similar. You can uniquely identify every person. There's a privacy key that was there. So they implemented DAA, direct anonymous attestation, and using zero knowledge proofs. You can actually use zero knowledge proofs and stuff of that sort to achieve some of the things that you're looking at. It is possible. The key challenge, as you rightly pointed out, is governance and how people would. I mean, you can have a smart contract, you can have everything, but if the legal structure doesn't support, I mean, literally what you're asking us is like, what is the legal structure? How is it going to work? For me, and I don't know honestly. I mean, if everybody were on a blockchain and every money in the whole world, there's no fiat, it's all cryptocurrency, it's all on smart contracts. Smart contracts rule the world. Just saying, okay. Forgive me for that. Yeah.
I'm a believer of the blockchain.
Yeah.
What I'm a little disappointed is that technology should actually facilitate, that the kind of intellectual property model and not copyright model. I only had two solutions right now on stage that were talking about bringing value to the intellectual property person, the data subject.
Yeah.
I had one product that was only looking into, I'm going to make a value out of the data without looking into what the quality of the data was.
Yeah.
And then I was seeing that where I'm actually still waiting for is if I have the possibility to go back so that someone is going to guarantee for the decision maker who's at the end for every of your models payer, who is actually going to be reliable for the quality of this data. And that is where the technology that you're actually talking about. We're right now looking into the Internet of Things data regulations because it's going to be huge and complex. So I'm excited about the time we are living in, but I want to listen and hear something here. What is actually going forward?
Can I make something visible that I think is underpinning a little bit of this?
Sure.
So we have two very different regulatory mechanisms available to the people who are interacting in a particular community, right? One of them is based on discretion. And so all of this reputation information, the kinds of things that we're able to make use of in these systems, end up enabling people to go, oh, you've been bad to others, maybe I'm not going to interact with you. And that potential influences behavior. Discretion locates on the body of the participant who's deciding whether or not to interact. The other mechanism that we have for influencing behavior is violence, where in that case, the enforcement action doesn't locate on the party who's making decision, it locates on the quote-unquote offender. Legal systems are all rooted in violence and need a body to influence. These systems don't necessarily need a body, but if they are looking to interact with and make use of legal architectures, we're having to go through this right now. Our organization is trying to bridge between this distributed space and the centralized space. That means we have to have bodies on the line in particular jurisdictions so that we can open up banking, right? And so there's going to be bridging, but that bridging is going to be context-based, based on the community and how they're trying to steer themselves, the jurisdictions that they're operating within, et cetera.
Can you tell Matt was a lawyer?
Yes.
I also think, just to share one thought, I think it's okay to say that we're in a nascent space that's very exciting, and there isn't a firmly defined set of protocols, whether it's an underlying blockchain or an identity management system. And it's exciting that a lot of things, the legal structure's not there, so it's exciting that there are a lot of things being tried in a lot of different jurisdictions all over the world. And I think that there's a process of natural selection. But we also, the people in this room especially who are kind of early interested, have an opportunity to influence which ones become winners. And there really are blockchain protocols that are going to be very much like the walled gardens we've gotten used to, and are going to exacerbate things like wealth polarization. And then there are blockchain protocols with implicit incentives to be egalitarian, right, to put that individual in the driver's seat. And I would actually make a moral appeal to everyone in this room to be discerning, to look at that founding team, to look at the incentives built into those blockchain architectures, and to support the ones that are going to benefit a wide swath of the population and not just a few people. Sorry, yeah, we'll have a few more questions.
I really love the discussions around consent, and what I'm really interested in with blockchain is the ability to withdraw consent. So if I check into a hotel and I give my identification, now they have it forever. Or if I choose to use Facebook, I give consent once, but now you have all of my information forever. And I'd like to be able to withdraw that or have a timeline. So I'd be interested in the panelists thoughts around being able to withdraw consent?
I can tell you technologically it's possible. The problem, as I was describing and he was highlighting, is the challenge of, bridging the two worlds, right? I can actually say to somebody, look, your consent for doing this is over, but they could still continue doing what they're doing. And what we have right now is like mechanisms for policing which actually lets other people, mechanisms in the centralized world recognize that in the decentralized world, this is something that's not compliant to a particular smart contract. That's the way I would describe it, right? Imagine you had smart contracts which describe what you did, and when they're just broken, you could just have this Oracle mechanism which talks to the police or information commissioner's office, says this person actually broke this rule. What happens next is a different question. I don't have an answer for that.
I think your question is really not consent, but it's digital rights management.
Yeah, it's
Not so
more
much
being able to
consent.
withdraw or have a time frame. If I do an e-commerce transaction at a specific website, I don't want you to have my information forever because I want.
Isn't that the most annoying thing in marketing? Like you buy a pair of socks and then you get sock ads forever.
Totally.
Whether it be a hotel, whether it be an e-commerce transaction, I want my consent to be limited in a time frame. I don't want you to have that access forever. And so I'm really interested in being able to withdraw consent.
So I don't think any of us would disagree with you. The reality is, in the current environment, the marketer's sitting there on one side of that transaction, and they're basically asking themselves, do I want your consent forever, or do I want your consent for a limited time frame? And they prefer it forever, and there's no pushback. And so unless or until consumers basically gain a voice and demand more rights, I don't think we can expect that to change.
I'd encourage you to, I think, as someone who's had many marketing roles at many technology startups, a lot of marketing is pretty poisonous. And you might know Seth Godin, he talks about permission marketing or opt-in marketing. I would encourage everybody here, whatever it is you're selling, to ask permission. It is so much more powerful to have 1,000 people on your database who all say, yes, I want it, than to have 10,000 or 100,000 people that you just bought a list or you pushed it on them.
Being the philosopher that I am, I'm going to take a slightly different swipe at this. The right to be forgotten, right? So this is, at one level, this is what you're focusing on. We had a good conversation on our team probably 6 months ago focused on this, and it was interesting in that we realized it's not actually possible to enforce forgetting. I'm not able to reach into his head and erase his memory of this day, right? And that's not even what we expect. What we expect is that that information becomes not acceptable as an input into a different process, right? And so that's one side, right? So if you say you share some information with somebody, you're not able to prevent them from holding on to it in some way,
Or even
technologically. Legally, you could have it so that there were consequences for them not having disposed of records of that data, for instance. But the other side here is what you're able to do is cut off ongoing access, right? So you go, hey, here's what I've been doing, and nope, you don't get that. You were able to see it for that period. Going forward, you've lost the relationship where you're able to gain updates, basically. And then the other piece here has to do with cultural norms or legal structures adjacent to that particular relationship. Where if I had shared something with you and then that information gets used elsewhere, there can be real consequences. Whether those are your customer base going, screw these guys, they'll rat you out, or law enforcement stepping in and putting people in jail.
Maybe we can go dark for just a second and maybe take one more question. I'd love to hear just very briefly, maybe from one of you, everything goes horribly wrong in blockchain identity management. We've talked a little bit about utopia. How about dystopia? Yeah.
Here, we'll start on the end and move along. He's got. I got something. I'll jump in.
So to me, the most important data that humans have is the genomic data set. And in a dystopia, if your genomic data set with all your data set is lost, your identity is lost. And if you had BCIs, brain computer interfaces,
You're
you can use
permanently
your memory
hacked.
and you're permanently down. So you can think of a matrix literally, and that will be that.
So the Gattaca nightmare.
We already have that in a sense, right? All our data points are out there. We all know it. Everyone's collecting it. We're not controlling it. People are monetizing it. I mean, That's what we're trying to prevent. That's already the reality. But I think it comes back to, again, like you check into a hotel and okay, they can have my data for 24 hours. All that stuff is technologically possible, right? So it comes down to responsible products and applications that do it the right way and have mass adoption. And that's not an easy thing to happen. I think there's a lot of people trying to do it.
It's hard because you can't legislate it globally.
Right.
So people look for...
Until you have companies like that have mass adoption with best practices and are doing it right and transparent, it's hard to change the huge game. I think the beautiful thing about blockchain right now is it's a sandbox, right? Everyone's trying this and that, and 95% of it's bullshit, but there's some of it that's going to come out of that. And again, we have to support those projects. We have to see them grow, and hopefully they'll begin to
and be discerning and maybe articulate for yourself the ethics behind a particular decision. All right, we have time for one more question, and then we're gonna.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to give an answer. I think blockchain doesn't help here. Data points are out, no matter they are stored on the blockchain or not. In the moment that they receive the information, they can store them to whatever they want to. But that's not the point of my question or my thing that I would like to address to you. Let's start a little bit earlier. When we talk about identity, then we have actually very certain layers to get to identity. It starts with the standards to govern the system. It goes with attribute collection and with authentication, connecting the attributes to a user. Then we have the authorization, which is actually the last mile, till we come to the service layer, right? How do you think? Why are all these new startups connecting, like the old economy, identity with access, putting on top a weak protection, and then run it out to the people and say, here we go? Why is it? Why is there no separation between access and identity, which probably makes sense from the information point of view, but also from the security point of view? Because if you hack the current system, you run through the identity layer, run through the access layer, and have access to the service layer. If you would separate identity and access into two different things, which can be combined, we wouldn't have that problem, right or not? This would be my question to you.
Can I give you can I attempt at answering that?
Please.
So, I like that you pointed out something very crucial to the whole conversation. What everybody should recognize is none of these startups live in an ecosystem. So I advise startups. I have a whole bunch of them. Some of them are big now. So they go through the same phases. They have a limited amount of resources. They look at the first hope, as I would describe it. For a solution, they look for the first hope in every plane. And that's literally the key problem. And the other problem is the network effect. If you really want to have any of this protocol to work, think of yourself like a virus, trying to spread your disease. If your ability to hope to the next person is less than half, you die out. You need to have more than half probability to get on to the next person. Literally, that applies to both from a protocol layer perspective and from a startup perspective. So if you disentangle something, create something totally new, you can't go back to the things that are existing. Number one, you're one hope already away from what exists. And secondly, the network is so tiny that you would never be able to monetize anything. That's my...
If you focus only on one thing, you mean if you only focus on one thing, then you don't have enough network effect to get it big?
Yes.
How come?
Look at the set of people that you can talk to at the same protocol layer. You have to understand how protocols work. So my job literally is writing protocols for people.
Let's talk later.
Yeah.
So let's consider this just sort of the beginning of the conversation. I've really appreciated all of the questions from the audience, and it's nice that this is a two-way discussion. I'd like to thank all of the panelists for being here today. Sorry if there were things you wanted to talk about that we didn't get to, but I think we need to move on to the next panel. So thank you.
Thank you.